I'm so excited to share this episode with you. I talk with Judy O'Halloran from Raising Robust Readers about teaching reading to students with Down syndrome and other cognitive challenges. Judy and her co-founder, Marilee Senior, created a unique phonics-based approach to teaching students to read. They've worked with children and adults to ensure that they have the opportunity to learn to read. We discuss the tendency for schools to push students into whole word reading programs and the need for teachers to raise expectations for our special education students. Judy offers some great suggestions that teachers can use in the classroom to begin using phonograms to teach reading. Welcome back to the Science of Special Education podcast. Today I've got Judy with me from Raising Robust Readers. How are you, Judy?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you. How are you doing?
Great. Well, I'm really excited to have you on here. I mentioned to you previously that when I was really starting to look into how I could help my students with cognitive disabilities learn to read, your program was one of the first things that came up in your Facebook page. And you and Marilee were always such a wealth of information. So I'm really excited to have you come on the program. Could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you kind of came to where we're at now with Raising Robust Readers?
Okay, thank you. Well, I understand the podcast only runs about an hour, so better keep my background story short. I even thought of kind of like a bullet thing that could get carried away. But I think if I just put it in a short summary, I could just say chronologically that I was an educator, taught English in middle school. I was that before I became a parent, and I was a parent twice before I had a child with Down syndrome, our third son, and then becoming a parent of a child with Down syndrome, I eventually became an advocate. As an advocate, I eventually became a student again because Casey, I knew was going to graduate functionally illiterate if I didn't somehow or other find a solution, because we were not getting the solution in the school district. Now, I will indicate here that Casey is now 41. So if you think there's challenges now, take that back about 30 years. So I spent, I'll bet, close to a decade trying to find something that that would solve this problem. And so I went to 2 universities. I went to every reading workshop they had for teachers when they were going to change programs. And eventually, in a conversation with a retired learning disabilities teacher, she mentioned, oh, he just needs an Orton-Gillingham program. And I'm going like, what's Orton-Gillingham? I've been at this for almost a decade. I haven't heard that term before. So she explained it. I set up an IEP meeting. I had the school hire her to come in during his reading period because they'd had up until this was like his sophomore year in high school. So I said, okay, we've got an answer. And Brett, it was amazing. Just within such a short amount of time, he became, he understood it. He made this quantum leap. And it was just so, that really solidified my, my belief in phonics, in phonograms, etc. So I went on to tutor, and eventually, as Marilee and I were going to introduce this to our grandchildren, and told Casey's first principal about it, and she said, you have a mission to share this with other children. So I went from just, okay, we're gonna just have fun with our grandchildren, to developing something that we quote, share with other children.
That's awesome. And you mentioned Orton-Gillingham. And so for our listeners who might not be familiar with what that is, it's kind of, a very systematic approach to teaching phonics. Lots of our schools these days have things like Wilson Foundations, a lot of other programs that have since kind of been labeled Orton-Gillingham type programs. Yes. One of the problems I ran into with teaching in a special education classroom is a lot of these programs specifically say they are not for students who have low IQ scores.
Absolutely.
To that as well.
Yes. And I have to tell you, as a parent and as a teacher who has tutored individuals with various cognitive challenges and learning disabilities, you might as well just take a smoking knife and put it in my heart. Of all the programs that would be best for our kids, and I always refer to them as our kids because I am that parent, this is the approach that we need to be using. And it's heartbreaking. In fact, Gigi's Playhouse, which is an international network of achievement centers for families who have individuals with Down syndrome, have free literacy tutoring sessions at their centers. It had been sight word based from the beginning, and then they realized in order to get our kids moving on to independent reading, they had to expand it. And they vetted different programs, and it was disheartening for them also to find out that once they mentioned the word Down syndrome, it was like, oh, well, no, we don't do that. Whereas that is where the heart of our program lies, because even though it's good even for gifted readers, obviously, at the very, very, very core of the development of the program was this, by that time, 30 some odd years of working with individuals with Down syndrome. So it just kind of came out of my pores, I guess, and Marilee's to have this program that would be specifically applicable to individuals with cognitive challenges.
So with your program, it's very systematic, similar to Orton Gillingham, but it's also very different. What are kind of the unique approaches that you take to teaching reading through your program?
Well, from the beginning, we really focused on it being child-centered as opposed to curriculum driven. Been trained in various programs, and they are very systematic, but they're curriculum driven. And we've always looked at the child as being unique, and we've looked at teachers as being brilliant, flexible people. And so although we have a very systematic set out of modules, we always stress the child. Look at the child and see where to go. So beyond being child-centered, we're phonics-based. So that then would be versus the 3 cueing system, let's say. But even within a phonics-based program, we're phonogram specific. And that would mean that we don't do phonics 1 letter, 1 sound. So if you were to try to sound out 8, eh, I, g, you would never get to 8. So that makes no sense. Why would you do it that way? Then you have to have a sight word for 8 and neighborhood and 80 and everything else that has EIGH in it. So we look at phonograms, not individual letters when we do that. Now, other programs are phonogram based, but we have a different approach with that as well, in that we start with single sound consonants. The reason for that, 1 sound, for that single sound consonant, so you have success. And that's at the heart of everything we do too. Start with something that children already know, students already know, get that confidence up, start building that, and then add little by little. So we start with single sound consonants. There's only 1 choice. Then instead of going to blending with, well, let me back up a bit before I get to the blending part. Within our sequence, we go from single sound consonants to vowel buddies, the A, Y, and we call these things vowel buddies because primarily we are a program to help parents understand this. So we don't want to be doing a lot of that academic stuff. And besides, teachers can translate vowel buddy to, vowel digraphs and all that sort of stuff. So then we go from the single sound consonants to those vowel buddies because we're now beginning to teach seeing a word and seeing a sound instead of a string of letters. So we go to those vowel buddies. Why also? They have one sound. Because if you stop and think about individuals with cognitive challenges, specifically we look at Down syndrome, the characteristics of those children are they're structured. They want a routine. They want things to be predictable. So if we were to start out with the typical consonant, single short vowel, consonant in blending and reading and so forth, then they're going to be drilled on ah, 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 ah. Then you come to a word later on and there's got an A. So we're pulling the rug out from underneath them at that point. So that's why we start blending. It's still a consonant vowel consonant pattern, but we're using a vowel buddy so that there's success. You know, they're not going to be fooled later on or have a meltdown. So there's more. Am I making sense so forth on why we
Yes.
pick that sequence? Okay,
Perfect
great.
sense. And one of the things that drew me to your program, I told you the story previously, but was a student I had who was in high school, about to transition, had never had any success with reading, and she couldn't, the memory challenges could not hold three sounds together to blend them. And I introduced that AY phonogram to her, and she just took off. She could read all of these words, and that success piece was that bridge, to make it further. So it makes perfect sense to me, but it's something that's very unique to your program. I haven't seen anybody else do that.
It is, and unique again in that even a phonogram-based program typically goes to that consonant, short vowel, consonant. Another difference is that there will be a smattering of word families in there, or especially when we go back to the single letter, single sound, we do not do word families. If you stop and think about it, let's take the AT family. Okay, AT, the cat sat on the mat with a rat, blah, 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 blah. So that's wonderful. But if that cat sat on a rat in the water with father, and let's see, he's in a boat. So let's say he's in a boat in the water with father. Okay, now if I've been drilled and drilled and drilled that AT equals at, then I'm going to read, oh, the fat cat sits on the mat in the boat, in the water with fatter. And of course, oh, no, that's water and so forth. So we don't want to do that. I mean, I think there's something like 34 common word families. Well, why teach that if you can teach OA says O, AY says A? So we just kind of applied not only, well, we started out with common sense and just, I guess, a natural way of looking at things, as I say, after working for so long with Casey and others. So we went from common sense to research, and it just makes sense if you do things in this kind of manner. So the beauty of it too is that when you start bringing in a double E to see the sounds in a word, and then you go to like AY, which only has one sound you can put at the end like you did. So as you know, bay, day, say, you're blending, but there's only two sounds. And so you don't have to do 26 letters or anything before you get to blending. You can do it after 3 or 4 and add it that way. So once we get into that blending part and we start expanding with the other phonograms, we get to single letter vowels. Okay, so now we're finally at that short A that they were teaching at the very beginning. And we couple that with syllables, the 6 syllables, and we do all 6 syllables introduction at the same time, because it's like learning the days of the week. You don't learn Monday in 1st grade and Tuesday in 2nd grade and so forth. So we introduce them all, and then we tie in a kind of syllable and the vowel, because it's that kind of syllable that determines the sound of the vowel. And it now makes sense for someone even with some cognitive challenge, learning disabilities, etc., because it's not piecemeal, it's all tied together. So I think basically that's the difference that we approach. And the beauty of it is that it's anybody could do that. All you have to do is just say, oh yeah, I get it, and you can do that in a classroom.
Yeah. I have to go back 1 second. You talked about the syllables and teaching the different syllable types. And that has always been where I find teachers struggle and my students have struggled.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've done is not just with syllable types, but with the phonograms as well, is introduce some songs and some fun things into that. Can you talk just a little bit about that in the program?
Oh, I'd love to. We're obviously we would approach this in a very, very multi-sensory manner. I don't think it takes a PhD to figure out the more ways we can do stuff, the better we learn. And then, of course, we have the research that shows that that's the way to do it. But, I have to attribute this to Marilee, because I am much more the academician than Marilee. And Marilee's very playful. And when we started doing this with our grandkids, she was like, Judy, if we teach this the way you've been doing it and this other stuff, they're going to run. They're never going to come over to the house. So, so we started with songs, jingles. So we have a jingle for all 72 phonograms. We just focus on the 72 main ones. And then we have a gesture that goes with it. And then along with that, we'll have what we call our clue box item. So there's a manipulative that goes with it. And when you use all of those, you can come at it from so many ways when you're teaching it. So definitely we do most everything. In fact, even when we're teaching a way of looking at something, Marilee will have done jingles on that and make it easy to do something like that. So when we did the 6 significant syllables, again, introducing them. And Brett, I will tell you that we have been in 3 3-year-old classrooms and then just introducing it. But in first grade, as a 3-year-old, you're just going to sing it like, Mary Had a Little Lamb or something. By the time you get a little older and into first grade and so forth, then all of this stuff begins to make sense. So the 6 silly syllables are open, closed, magic, E, bossy R, vowel buddy, consonant E. So we just sing that song. And, these kids, I mean, I get such a kick out of children who have cognitive and learning, working memory problems, whatever, and they sing every verse of Frozen there is. And I'm thinking, like, there's 6 types. You can handle this. So,
yeah.
So that's how we do it. And then individually, we go through the teaching each one. We don't slap them all down, but then those terms are already in the back of their mind. Plus, if you'll notice, Brett, and you will because you're so astute, is that if you have a vowel buddy syllable, oh, listen, I've already learned vowel buddy phonogram. So, woo, there you go. There's a perfect meld. Bossy R syllables. Oh, I already learned about those bossy R phonograms. So and I think that's so important for parents, teachers, everyone to think about, well, look, if I'm going to do this later, what is it that I can do right now to like meld and work into that? So that's what we've tried to do in our approach.
Yeah, that connection, that scaffolding piece to get them from that one place is really for all students is so important, but especially I find, helping our students with different, cognitive disabilities, make those connections to the real world. Another thing that I love over on your Facebook page, and I'll put links, down below for our listeners into the show notes. But one of the things I love is seeing, you talked about a child-centered approach and seeing the different activities that you've got a lot of parents who are very creative. And, the
Yes.
way that they use that child-centered approach around the house and around school. Like, for example, Christmas is coming up. Perfect
Yes.
time to introduce that CH, making the K
Yeah.
sound. And,
Yes.
seeing them posted and things like that. Is there any kind of tips or strategies that you would give to a teacher just starting out? I know you've got a lot of parents and teachers who use the program or who like it, but what's something that parents come back to you and say, well, this is really easy for me to implement into my day?
Well, we stress on the go wherever you go. And while that's easy for parents to do in the grocery store, in the car, at church, wherever they happen to be, teachers can still do the same thing. They can be pointing out whatever phonogram they happen to be working on as they're walking from the room to the cafeteria, let's say. And so one time, oh, this was a wonderful story. One of the 4K teachers was telling us they were out on the playground playing. It was recess time. This was a 4K program. It's Florida. It's hot. And one of the little girls just stood up. She spread out her legs and she starts fanning her face and she goes, "Oh, F says, F says, fan my hot face. F says." So I just think that whole piece of doing it on the go, wherever you go, and bringing in whatever it is around you makes it so real that way. And just, it just stuck with her. And again, she had the jingle to go by, she had the gesture to go by, and it just, I don't know, that just touched my heart so much to know that it was doing that. Another point, Brett, something that you're very familiar with, and our teachers, our special ed teachers, are familiar with, not just Down syndrome, but others who have some challenges. Generalizing from that worksheet on the desk to the real world is not an easy step. I remember when Casey was in he was in high school then. The transition teacher was telling me, look, what you have to understand is that if it takes a typical student 3 times to learn something, it's going to take Casey 300 times. I'm like, oh my God, 300 times. No wonder I feel the way I do. So if we can generalize that for them, and that's on the playground, that's in the hallway, that's bringing real life oatmeal boxes into the classroom, Cheerios, where you've got your OA, got your double E, and many of the teachers are doing that already, and making it real. But I would stress that it just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the time thing, because that's one thing that I do try and stress to teachers is that it's going to take more time, right? I don't know if you've had this experience with parents and teachers coming to you to your program, but what I oftentimes hear is from parents is that their students are removed from the typical phonics program real early, kindergarten, first grade, and put into a whole word reading program right
Mm-hmm.
from the start. And they're not really given
Mm-hmm.
the chance to, because they're not keeping up with everybody else. Has that been your experience as well?
Yes. And of course, a lot of times by the time parents will approach us, or they'll come to our website, or they'll send us questions, the kiddos are maybe in about the 3rd grade. And the reason is, one of the reasons, is that, okay, fine, everybody is learning sight words, and we have these sight words, and it's, okay, we'll give them this and we'll give them that. And, parents are working like crazy at home doing all the repetition. But or 3Qing, oh, look at the picture, so forth and so on. Repetition, reading it, the parents reading it 5 times at home, so by the time they take the test at school, they have it memorized, etc. All of that sort of stuff. But if we look at it, usually by about the 3rd grade, the parent is beginning to understand, this isn't working. This, we look at other stuff and he or she can't read. And so 2 things are going to happen. Parents are getting really, really frustrated, and they're beginning to think either maybe there's something else, or this is it, they're not going to read. The other half is that we now have a situation with the teachers because they don't have the resources that they need, and maybe the district is saying, okay, use this particular kind of program, then they'll be going like, okay, kids can't learn phonics if they've tried to do it. And so we're just really going to stick with these sight words for the next 18 years. But going back to the phonics part too, what we found is that if a classroom will even allow it, phonics in the classroom, that if they're doing the typical, what I call the traditional one letter, one sound, going back to that I mean, nobody's going to get that really unless you can make the connection yourself. But for our kiddos, of course it doesn't work. And they're not going to understand why 8 is a. There's not even an A in that word. So then everybody puts up their hands and says, you know, we knew from the beginning, you know, these kids can't learn to read. So it becomes the kids' fault, not the system, not the approach that was done. So I just think that's real important. Yes, it needs to be done over and over, but it also needs to be done again in that child-centered way. Look at the characteristics. Look at that. I need predictability. I need structure. I need something that's clear. I need something that makes sense, and teach it that way.
And a lot of our kids stay in school till they're 21. So when you think about the grand scheme of things, they really have from 5 to 21, they've got a significant amount of time. If you look at it from a long game perspective, they've got a significant amount of time versus, in the general education classroom, we're probably only really doing anything with phonics in K to 2, and then you're on your own. But if we look at it from that long-term perspective, they have the time. We're not on a time crunch, right now in kindergarten. We've got a while to work on this.
Right, exactly. You are so right. I'm here going like, and one of the reasons that that we do this child-centered approach as opposed to the curriculum where it's okay, it's December 3rd, you got to be on page whatever, is that the initial approach being for parents, they're not on a schedule. So we really wanted them to focus on the flexibility of doing what your particular child needs. But we also felt that with teachers. And again, we started a lot with preschool. So, I mean, I don't think there's anybody more flexible than a preschool teacher, unless, I don't know, maybe it's a Pilates person or something. But they're working with little gnats. I mean, these children, you got 20 little gnats in a classroom doing all sorts of different things. I mean, they got to be on their toes. So I don't want to tell somebody to be on page 27 by a certain time. I want them to look at the children and see how they, with all of their talent, can take this basic common sense information and say, okay, how can I individualize this for myself? And how can I individualize it for Susie? And how can I individualize it for Pete and Rodriguez and so forth? So no, that's the way. And I will be honest, and we understand it, and we say, God bless you, to the person who says, I can't do this. I have to have the curriculum in my hand. And it's not because they're not flexible or intelligent. It could very easily be all of this stuff that's falling on the shoulders of teachers these days. Plus, maybe a district and administration that says you're going to teach this. You're not going to teach any other way. This is what you have to do. So, and we understand it's not a totally flexible program, even with a very structured module, can be too challenging.
Well, I think that in general, it's very overwhelming for adults, right? To look back and because we just read now, right? We don't
Absolutely,
think
yes.
back to like even when I was learning like the syllables, I was like, I don't even know what these are. Like I've got to go back and learn. And especially for a parent who's coming into it without that, education piece, it's a lot. It's a lot to take on. But I
It,
think
go
I think
ahead.
one of the things that I like about your program and that child-centered approach is you don't have to take it on all at once, right? You
Oh,
you
no.
can do just a little bit at a time.
Yep, yep. In fact, we were talking about the jingles and so forth. Our philosophy is, and this again, going back to Marilee, she looks at the program as someone who had initially no idea of what I was talking about. You know, sounds like you're throwing up, but how can this makes no sense? So she took it from the standpoint of, look, you know what you're talking about. You're very good at being flexible. You're on the spot, kind of switching, teaching. However, the typical parent isn't like that. So that's when she came in with the jingles and we worked together on those, but she's the mastermind. So the program has been developed in such a way that it is taught to the adult the way the adult will teach it to the child, which is what you did, Brett, when you did that AY. You learned AY makes an A, AY makes an A. I see a ray in the bay, AY makes an A. You learned that and it was ingrained, and then the gesture and so forth. So we didn't teach it to you in an academic manner. We taught it to you and anybody else the way we want them to transfer that information to their child. And I think the beauty of this is that because it's simple, that a classroom teacher can take that information. And so the homework goes home. Let's say you've got, and it doesn't matter. You could be the transition teacher, you could be the self-contained ESE classroom teacher, you could be whatever, but you could take that little piece of homework, speech. We did the same thing with speech pathologists. Take that jingle and send it home and say, teach your child this song. Well, if you could teach nursery rhymes, you can teach a song, a little jingle like this, but then the teacher can say, okay, this weekend when you're at the grocery store, let's say it's double E, they're working, see if your child can find 5 things. So we got Keeblers and we got Cheetos, we got Cheers. This is not hard. And you don't need worksheets or so forth. And if you can get the parent in on it, so that 6 hours a day that you have, that's only a little bit of this for reading, then the parent can do it and the parent learns. So you are educating not only the child, you're educating the parent. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. It's just terrific
I
to
love
have
that.
that teamwork.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So important, especially for our students, but having that home connection piece and being able to send just something small and simple they
Yes.
can do at home, I think is a big
Right.
help.
Yeah. So Monday, they may ask them to do this with it. Tuesday, they may ask them to do a different thing. Wednesday, so find something in your house that, has in your pantry, that sort of thing. Parents don't realize that they can teach reading. They think, they're told from day one, read to your child in utero and so forth. But, we just don't point to a car and name it and then think that our teenager can drive it. I mean, we have to teach them how to do it. And parents have the ability to do it. They have the skill to do it when they're when they're encountering something like a science of reading approach instead of this other stuff. But they feel so much more comfortable because we work with a lot of parents who work with teachers. They're like a team. So they rely on that teacher to guide them. And the teacher's got the instinct. They know what that particular child needs. And so they can they could just make up simple little homework things, find double E in the grocery flyer. Well, buy one, get one free, double E's all over the place. It's easy for the parent. They're using something that's simple, but they rely on the teacher and they feel so much more confident when they're doing what the teacher tells them.
And talk about functional skills and life skills, right? You've got that grocery ad out and you're
Oh,
helping them find things.
Absolutely. I'll give you a hint. And okay, teachers, send the parents to the card section. Tell them to the dollar store and dollar quarter store. Then Casey learned so much reading in the card section of the store. And I want you to know today, he is the card man in our family. This guy picks out cards like you wouldn't believe. But it had a function, and at first, of course, the I do, we do, you do, of course, you start out with reading it and so forth. But the function of that, the function of knowing what the words are on the washer and the dryer. I mean, not everything, obviously, but and even in the classroom, AY, there's a gray crayon. You're learning to look now at the crayons. There's so many ways that it can be practical. It's just, I like to think of it as the 23-degree look, where you just kind of tilt your head about 23 degrees. It's the same as everything, but now you got a little bit of a different way to approach it. But so important to be thinking about the future. And I know school seems like it's forever for a parent and it's 180 days for a teacher, but the time after graduation is when the proverbial rubber hits the road. And I used to say that, oh my heavens, if I knew what it was like after graduation, I would have thought that the district was nirvana. That's not what I thought. And but we won't. I hope you cut this out. So just always be thinking ahead. Think of what are some things you need in the workplace. What do you have them pick this stuff out in the grocery store or someplace else. Functional, but not functional like learning poison words or something.
Yes.
I mean, I really, in the big scheme of things, never thought that Casey was going to race past a do not enter sign into the ladies' room and drink the cleaning products. I mean, I just never thought he was going to do that anyway. But I thought there were some other things that might be important for him to be able to read.
And that's one of the things I oftentimes hear is, well, we can't teach them how to read because we're focused on functional and life skills. So they're just going to memorize these couple hundred of words, like horse. Well, he's never going to need to know the word horse, right? But he needs to be able to read a bus schedule. He needs to be able to read write an email to his boss or a text to his boss saying, I'm sick and I can't come in. And you can't do that by just going through one of these programs where you learn 100 words.
I know it. I don't get that. Basic skills kindergarten. I mean, basic skills. What could be more basic than learning to read? The opportunities that are opened, the employment, the independent living, the social skills that you get from learning how to read. Now, I know that there are some individuals who are not going to learn how to read. Okay. And that's fine, absolutely fine if that happens to be the child's limitations, cognitively, neurologically, etc. That's fine. But it's not fine if you start out in the first grade learning all of these words, or quite frankly, if a child is in a typical classroom, 220 words. Oh, here we have 220 sight words. Well, I've got 72 phonograms I can give you, and you're going to be able to do a lot more than that. So, plus, it's more fun to sing it than learn it in a list. Flashcards.
Yeah, that always just boggles my mind how in first grade, we're deciding that somebody can't read. In my opinion, maybe if you're 11th, 12th grade, getting ready to transition, then okay, you still haven't mastered, enough reading to really be functional. Let's teach you a few words that you're really going to need to know. That makes sense at the very end of your education journey, but in kindergarten and
Yes.
first grade to be
Yes.
saying your child's not going to be able to read.
Right.
Is
Although I would remind you about the name of your podcast, which is Science of Reading for Special Ed Teachers, and say, okay, yeah, by the time we get to that, but how about if we give this child the benefit of a systematic, explicit way of learning the code to our language and take our time doing it and build up that confidence and do it the right way. Now, we talk about going beyond sight words when we're talking with parents and teachers and so forth. Our approach is to go beyond sight words because we think that that's a brick wall. And then starting with the attitude that that's all you can do is even worse. But if you have, but there are certain words that we do acknowledge are good to learn, is this the, a, etc., on, in, so you can expand those sentences, and you want to get to that we haven't talked about that either, have we, Brett? That comprehension piece, because that's what it's all about, for heaven's sakes, comprehending. So when you're doing, let's say you've got A, Y, and double E, we've talked about that already before. So you can start out early on with, with the simple sentence that the child would read, I see a gray sheep. All right. And then below you got a pink pig, you got a gray horse, you got a gray sheep, you got something else, and the child picks it out. You're starting with comprehension right away, and they're building on that. But if we want to expand that sentence a bit and add prepositions, then yes, we're going to have some sight words there. And we've acknowledged too that there is a place at the beginning, especially for parents who have a child who's cognitively challenged. When they do that flashcard stuff, which is, what we're into right now, it gives them hope. Oh, my child's going to read. Look at that. He read hippopotamus. Then okay. I'm going to say go for it if that helps you, but realize that you're kind of working a memory thing, but let's transfer that over to IGH,
Yeah, and I hear from teachers all the time about how successful the student is with the whole word and the sight words, and it's true. They do memorize, and I think that it does give a lot of hope. My problem came in as a high school teacher is that the students would come to me and they could not transition from that guessing the word into phonics because they had been so ingrained with that. I have to memorize this whole word, and
right.
then I'm guessing a word because it starts with the same shape. And so that's where I get into focusing so much on that as the only option at such a young age. I think really in the long run, although it might look like they're making a lot of success short term, in the long run, it doesn't help as much.
And as I said, it breaks my heart to see this happen, to mold a person who, again, structured. You learn something this way, then that's the way it's going to be. So to limit that person, to tether him or her to sight words and not give them the opportunity. So I guess I would say to any teachers listening, if any of this makes sense, if your experiences, and here you are in high school experiencing that, if the more they research and so forth, if they realize the potential of these little cherubs that are sitting in front of them, if they would advocate for them, get that research, bring it on, and and say, okay, this is we have to give this child, instead of the attitude. And I don't think there's probably a listener out there that would say, like at the end of first semester, I knew this wouldn't work. And I've got notes, unfortunately, I hope I can do this without crying. we're trying to clean out our garage. And so my husband showed me a notebook from one of Casey's teachers. And she was just going on about what a great job he had done on something. And Judy, don't send in fat crayons. I want him using the little crayons like I know he can do it. She was so positive. And so then I turned the page and I read the note I sent back to her. And, oh, Rhonda, thank you so much. I really appreciate. I just wish every kid had a teacher like you, instead of the teacher that I heard about last week from a parent who said, when the parent took the child out of the kindergarten classroom, I knew he couldn't do it. Well, of course he couldn't do it. He was never going to succeed in that because he was never given the chance. But what's heartwarming for me as a parent is that there are now opportunities like this, that you have teachers who are sitting out there who are listening to your series of podcasts, and they're doing it because they do care and because they don't have the philosophy of I knew it didn't work. I'm glad I lived long enough to see it. Let's just put it that way.
It is true. I really, and especially in the last few months with, it taking even more, media and whatnot, people really embracing it has really given me a lot of hope. And a lot of times I feel like our students are left out of the conversation, but I am seeing so many special education teachers who are like, I know that there's something that can be done. I know that it's and the research is there. And
yes.
I'm very heartened that I'm seeing more and more researchers coming into this space as well.
Yes.
And going beyond that sight word, going beyond and saying, hey, it doesn't matter if your Q is 40, you can still learn how to read and showing that. So I definitely am seeing much more excitement. And I think teachers are starting to see that there's more that they can do. The expectations, we have to raise those expectations for not only our students, but also for those that are working with them as well.
Right. And, I think if we have, again, a special ed teacher who realizes this is the way to go, they may think about approaching one of their more proactive parents. Because if you look at the movement that we have right now, Brett, and you certainly have, I feel that it's parent. It's not parent motivated. I happen to be Catholic. I'm going to put Emily Hanford up for a saint. I think you have to go through a process to become a saint, but I'm going to put her name in because she has been the impetus for this movement with her podcasts and bringing so much to light. So that's just wonderful. But you get parents who start to believe in something and they realize, and they've been home with COVID and they see their kids can't read. If you can help to educate them and send them as a teacher to different places, they can get things done that many, many, many times a teacher coming to an IEP table kind of has a little bit of tape maybe that they're not supposed to use and so forth. So as a team, I think that can just be unbeatable. And I hope a great future hope for our kids, because I really didn't. And it is this programs like yours where you have taken the initiative to do this as well, because 20 some odd 30 years ago we didn't have that. We didn't have any of this. So even though I was introduced to Orton Gillingham phonograms, teachers were not, because I was in that classroom, in that beginning classroom teacher in the university where I'm surrounded by 18, 19-year-old kids who didn't know what phonics was because they were never taught phonics. And there were probably 2 sessions during the semester that talked about phonics, and then they're supposed to go out and teach reading.
Right.
So we're in a great opportunity now, I think. So
I agree. I agree. Well,
I
Judy,
hope.
you have certainly given us a lot of information, lots of great tips that I think teachers can take. Just a couple of things that are on the top of my head that you said that I really think teachers could take and run with is that communication piece with parents and giving them those little things like finding the EE in the grocery store. Things that are simple like that are something that they really could put into place into their classrooms tomorrow. They could put that in there and they could run with it. Those little things, as we know, it can be overwhelming to try and take everything on at once, but those little things they could definitely do.
Right. Absolutely.
Judy, is there, if teachers are interested in learning more, is there, where would you direct them to? How can they find you? How can they connect with you guys?
Oh, gee, thank you for asking. We do have a website, raisingrobustreaders.com. It's got a lot of information, a lot of videos, and your remark before about adults, I would draw everybody's attention to Devin, who at 27 was illiterate, although he desperately wanted to know how to read. And in such a short time, showing him the code, this guy was reading. So there are videos there, there's explanations, and would love to have everybody join our Phonics for Folks with Down Syndrome Facebook page and ask too that, oh gosh, if you have any questions, just put them up there. We've got educators, we've got parents, and Marilee is always
Marilee
monitoring
does an
that and
excellent
putting
job
stuff up.
answering
Oh,
those
doesn't she do an excellent
questions.
job? She
Yeah,
does. Oh my gosh. She's just in there and just working that. She's such a blessing. But I have to tell you too, I mean, we're just two little old ladies in Southwest Florida, so give us a call. Our number somewhere. We welcome anytime we have somebody get in contact with us. We'll just say, yeah, look, send me some times that are good for you, because I think if we could talk about this instead of texting an answer back, it would be so much more profitable. So, and I guess it just all goes back to that principal of Casey's who said we had a mission to share this, and that's what we do it for. It's just it changed Casey's life. Casey worked for 21 years in the courthouse. He's been married for 4 years. He can get around this town better than we can. I don't want to tell you about the Amazon bill that he has to pay, but this guy knows what he's doing. So it's if we can help another family or a teacher, we're just doing our mission.
Awesome.
So call us.
Judy, I will put those links down in the show notes for our listeners, and I highly encourage them to check that out. There are tons of resources on there. Even if you're not buying the program, the videos I have found are just amazing. Because
oh, good.
And I've often shared those with teachers just to show it is possible. It is possible.
Oh, thank you so much, and especially the phonics for folks with Down syndrome. You absolutely do not have to buy our program. You don't have to buy our program for anything, to get in touch with us, to ask us questions, whatever it happens to be. That's not a prerequisite. We're just passionate about, it's such a trite word, but I'm sorry. That's what, we're committed
right.
to
Yeah.
helping as many people as we can.
Well, thank you again, Judy. It was awesome to talk to you today. Hopefully we'll have you back another time.
Oh, I'd love it. And thank you for the opportunity to reach some special ed teachers. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.